When a mother's voice came through from the past, no one was ready, not even Dr. Phil. The studio fell into absolute silence. Dr. Phil sat frozen in his chair, his hand pressed against his chest. Across from him, Sarah Mitchell held her phone with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face as the voice of her late mother filled the room. The audience, usually quick to react, sat motionless. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't planned. This was raw, unfiltered grief crashing into a television studio in real time. Dr. Phil looked at the production booth and made a gesture no one expected. "Stop the tape," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Just stop." The crew exchanged glances. In over 2 decades of television, Dr. Phil had never done this. He stood up slowly, walked over to Sarah, and sat beside her on the couch. No cameras, no audience, just 2 people sharing a moment of profound loss. But how did we get here? How did a simple voicemail become the most emotional moment in Dr. Phil's history? 3 weeks earlier, Sarah Mitchell had sent an email that changed everything. She was 36 years old, a single mother of 2 living in Columbus, Ohio. 5 years ago, her mother, Linda, had passed away suddenly from a brain aneurysm. One moment, she was laughing at the dinner table. The next, she was gone. No warning, no goodbye, no final words. Sarah had spent those 5 years in a fog of grief, struggling to remember her mother's voice, the way she laughed, the warmth of her presence. Memories were fading, and that terrified her more than anything. Then, one night while cleaning out an old storage unit, Sarah found it, her mother's phone. The battery was dead, the screen cracked, but it powered on. And there, in the voicemail inbox, was a message Linda had left herself 3 days before she died. Sarah had listened to it once, just once, and she couldn't bring herself to play it again. That's when she reached out to Dr. Phil. Not for advice, not for therapy, but because she needed someone to help her understand what to do with this ghost from the past. This 23-second recording that held the last living piece of her mother's voice. Dr. Phil's team reviewed her story. They'd seen thousands of cases over the years: addiction, betrayal, family conflict, trauma. But this was different. This was about love, loss, and the unbearable weight of holding on to something you can never truly keep. They invited Sarah to the show. The morning of the taping, Sarah sat in a green room clutching her phone like a lifeline. A producer asked if she was ready. She nodded, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Dr. Phil had read her file twice. He knew the facts. Linda Mitchell, age 58, sudden death, no prior health issues, left behind 3 kids and 6 grandchildren. But facts don't capture the weight of loss. They don't explain what it feels like to lose your mother without warning, to spend years wishing you could hear her voice just one more time. As Sarah walked onto the stage, the audience applauded warmly. She managed a small smile, but her eyes were already wet. Dr. Phil greeted her with a hug, something he rarely did before the camera started rolling. "Sarah," he said gently, guiding her to the couch, "thank you for being here. I know this isn't easy." She nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Phil sat across from her in his chair, leaning forward with his hands clasped. "Tell me about your mom." And Sarah did. She talked about how Linda had been the glue that held their family together, how she'd raised 3 kids on her own after their father left, how she never missed the school play or soccer game, how she made the best lasagna in the world, how she laughed so loud it embarrassed Sarah as a teenager, but now was the sound she missed most. The audience listened, silent and engaged. This was the kind of story that transcended television. It was human. It was universal. Then Dr. Phil asked the question that would change everything. "Sarah, you mentioned in your email that you found a voicemail from your mother. Can you tell me about that?" Sarah's breath hitched. She looked down at the phone in her lap, her fingers brushing over the cracked screen. "I found her old phone," she said quietly. "It still had some charge left." And there in the voicemail inbox was a message Linda had left herself 3 days before she died. Sarah had listened to it once, just once, and she couldn't bring herself to play it again. That's when she reached out to Dr. Phil. Not for advice, not for therapy, but because she needed someone to help her understand what to do with this ghost from the past. This 23-second recording that held the last living piece of her mother's voice.
Phil paused, looking down at his hands. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the stage lights. He looked up at Sarah, then at the phone in her lap. "May I ask you something?" Sarah nodded. "Do you want to play it now?" The question hung in the air like a weight. Sarah's eyes went wide. She hadn't expected this. She thought they would talk about it, analyze it, maybe find some therapeutic framework to help her process it. She hadn't thought she'd actually have to play it here in front of millions of people. I don't know," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I'm scared." "Of what?" Dr. Phil asked gently. "Of forgetting her again," Sarah said, tears spilling over. "If I play it and I hear her voice, I'm afraid that when it stops, it'll feel like losing her all over again." Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. He stood up slowly, walked over to the edge of the stage, and looked directly at the camera. Not at Sarah, not at the audience, at the millions of people watching at home. "I want everyone to understand something," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "What you're about to witness isn't entertainment. This is a daughter trying to hold on to the last piece of her mother. This is grief in its purest, most vulnerable form. And if you're watching this and you've lost someone, you know exactly what Sarah is feeling right now." He turned back to Sarah, who was trembling in her seat. He walked over and sat down beside her on the couch, breaking his own show's format, abandoning the traditional host and guest dynamic. "Sarah," he said softly, "you don't have to do this. Not here, not now, not ever, if you don't want to. But I'll tell you something I've learned in all my years doing this work. The things we're most afraid of are often the things we need most." Sarah looked at him, her face a portrait of raw pain. "What if it hurts too much?" "It will," Dr. Phil said honestly. "It will hurt. But you know what hurts more? Carrying this alone. You've been holding this phone for weeks, too afraid to press play, too afraid to let go. That's no way to live, Sarah. Your mother wouldn't want that for you." Sarah let out a choked sob, her shoulder shaking. Dr. Phil put a hand on her shoulder, not saying anything, just being there. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah whispered, "Okay, I'll play it." Dr. Phil nodded and stood up, but he didn't return to his chair. He stayed close, standing just a few feet away. He looked at the production booth and made a hand signal. "Kill the music, no sound effects, just let it be." The crew obeyed. The usual background ambience faded away. The studio became a cathedral of silence. Sarah unlocked her phone with trembling fingers. She navigated to the voicemail, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. She looked up at Dr. Phil one last time, and he nodded. "It's okay. We're right here with you." She pressed play. At first, there was static, then a click, and then a voice. "Hey, it's me. Don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning before 5, and grab some milk on the way home. Love you." 23 seconds. That was all. But in those 23 seconds, Linda Mitchell was alive again. Her voice, warm, casual, full of life, filled the studio like a presence. The audience gasped. Some covered their mouth. Others reached for tissues. A woman in the third row started crying openly. Sarah's face crumpled. She doubled over, clutching the phone to her chest, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "Mom, I miss you so much." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He knelt down beside Sarah, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the audience, ignoring everything except the woman in front of him who was drowning in grief. He didn't try to console her with words. He didn't offer platitudes. He just stayed there, one hand on her shoulder, letting her cry. The cameras kept rolling, but this wasn't television anymore. This was humanity at its rawest, most real, most vulnerable. After a long moment, Dr. Phil spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, Can I tell you something? She nodded, still unable to look up. Your mother's voice isn't trapped in that phone. It's in you. It's in the way you laugh, the way you talk to your kids, the way you remember her stories.
And that voicemail is beautiful, and it's precious. But it's not the only piece of her you have left. She's in your heart. She's in your memories. She's in every choice you make because of the love she gave you. Sarah finally looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. But I'm so afraid of forgetting. You won't, Dr. Phil said firmly. You won't forget her. Not because of a voicemail, but because of who she was and who you are. Because of her. That's the real legacy, Sarah, not a recording. The love she gave you, the strength she built in you. That's what lasts. Sarah took a shaky breath, then another. Slowly, the sobs subsided. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked down at the phone again. Can I play it one more time? Dr. Phil smiled softly. As many times as you need. She pressed play again. This time she didn't cry. She closed her eyes and just listened. And when the message ended, she whispered, "Thank you, Mom. I love you too." The audience erupted into applause, not the polite, obligatory kind, but the kind that comes from deep emotion, from shared grief, from collective catharsis. People stood up, wiping their eyes, clapping, not just for Sarah, but for every person who'd ever lost someone they loved. Dr. Phil stood up and helped Sarah to her feet. He looked at the camera one more time. If you've lost someone, hold on to the love, not the pain, the love. That's what they'd want. That's what lasts. But what happened next is something no one in the room or watching at home saw coming. As the applause continued, a member of Dr. Phil's team walked onto the stage carrying a small envelope. Dr. Phil looked surprised. He hadn't been told about this. The producer whispered something in his ear and his expression shifted. He turned to Sarah. "There's one more thing," he said carefully. "When you reached out to us, our team did some research. We contacted your family, your mother's friends, people who knew her, and we found something." Sarah's eyes went wide. "What?" Dr. Phil held up the envelope. "Your mother kept a journal, and one of her friends still has it. She wanted you to have this." He handed Sarah the envelope. Inside was a single page carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. It was a handwritten letter dated 2 days before Linda's death. Sarah's hand shook as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the page and fresh tears began to fall. "It's a letter," she whispered to me. "She wrote me a letter. Would you like to read it?" Dr. Phil asked gently. Sarah nodded. She took a deep breath and began to read aloud, her voice breaking with every word. "My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I don't know when or how, but I know that one day I won't be there to tell you how much I love you. So I'm telling you now. You are the strongest, most beautiful person I know. You've been through so much, and you've never given up. I'm so proud of you. I need you to know that even when I'm not there, I'm still with you. In every sunrise, every laugh, every moment of joy. Don't hold on to the sadness. Hold on to the love. That's all that matters. I love you more than words can say. Forever. Mom." By the time Sarah finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Dr. Phil wiped his own eyes, not bothering to hide his emotion. The audience was openly weeping. Even the crew members, usually stoic and professional, were struggling to maintain composure. Sarah clutched the letter to her chest, her whole body shaking. "She knew," she whispered. "She knew I'd need this." Dr. Phil nodded. "She knew. And she made sure you'd have it." He put a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Your mother's love didn't end when she died, Sarah. It's still here, in that voicemail, in that letter, in you. And it always will be." Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, but for the first time since she'd walked onto that stage, there was something else in her eyes. Not just grief, Not just pain. Hope. Peace. Acceptance. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for helping me hear her again. Dr. Phil smiled, his own eyes glistening. No, Sarah. Thank you for reminding all of us what really matters. The cameras captured one final image. Sarah standing on that stage, holding her mother's letter in one hand and her phone in the other. Two pieces of the past. Two reminders that love doesn't die when someone does. It transforms. It endures. It becomes the foundation of everything we are. Dr. Phil walked Sarah off the stage, his arm around her shoulders. As they disappeared behind the curtain, he turned back to the camera one last time. If you've lost someone, hold on to the love, not the pain. The love. That's what they'd want. That's what lasts. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The lights dimmed, the audience rose to their feet, and somewhere in the silence between the applause, Linda Mitchell's voice played one more time in Sarah's heart. Love you.